So welcome everybody to Bully Prevention Overview. I'm Angela McBeck, Prevention and Intervention Specialist.
Hi, I'm Craig Cleveland. I'm also a Prevention and Intervention Specialist.
So we know with the shift and everything that's been going on with technology and distance learning, so we figured we'd go over just a few techniques and things about bully prevention for you all. So just real quick about our organization. We're CA Help. We're located in Apple Valley, California. We have 3 entities embedded within CA Help. We have Desert Mountain SELPA, and that's where us prevention and intervention specialists go out and support districts and LEAs on their PIS implementation. We also go out and train. We also have program specialists that support our districts as well. And then we have Desert Mountain Charter SELPA, and that's just to say that we support charter schools as well. And then we have DMCC, which is our Desert Mountain Children's Center, and that's where we have clinicians, counselors that students are referred to for support. And you might see more of like a tier 2 or tier 3 supports within that entity. So that's just our organization and how we support our schools and LEAs.
We have some expectations for this webinar I hope you all can agree to. The first is be respectful. We're going to place everyone on mute, and we'll use the chat box to your right to answer any questions and prompts. We also want to be safe. In this context, it means keeping in mind all of the current events and the confidentiality that comes into play sometimes when we discuss students and past experiences that we've observed. So discuss those things with discretion and professionalism. We also want you to be responsible. So actively engage with the content, your other participants, the hosts, myself and Angie, and also try to enjoy yourself and participate to the best of your ability. All right, we've got some outcomes for this training. Hopefully by the end of this training, we will have already defined bullying, distinguished the different types of bullying that we sometimes observe on campus, identify strategies for preventing and addressing bullying behavior, and we'll introduce some examples from some of our local districts on how they've progressed with bullying prevention implementation. Also, here's just a quick guide for using Zoom with us. We are recording, so we took the liberty of muting everyone ahead of time. We also, as a part of you being muted, you'll be able to chat again in the group chat, but we'll have some breakouts later in the webinar where your microphones will be unmuted so you can discuss with your colleagues. And yeah.
And also there's a view, you should be able to see our PowerPoint and then a view on the side of participants. If you want to click on there, you can change it to show small active speaker video. You can as well, but it's up to you.
Okay, all of our materials will be loaded up to the website where you first registered for this webinar later today.
Thank you, Craig. So we're going to start with going over interconnected multi-tiered systems of support. So as many of you may know that in TSS, there's 3 tiers, right? There's tier 1, which is that universal, which is the bottom portion, the green. There's tier 2, which is targeted, right? And that's for 10 to 15% of students. And that could be either social skills groups or check and check out, whatever that looks like on your campus. And then there's 3, right? Which that one is individualized supports. Bully prevention should be a part of your tier 1 supports on campus. And that's meaning that you're preventative. So whether it's school-wide expectations, posters that you put on campus, assemblies, that's part of your tier 1. You want to make sure that you're being preventative. It can be a part of tier 2 and tier 3, but it seems like that would be more of a reactive response to bullying. So tier 1 is ensuring that it goes to 100% of your students and that it's out there.
All right, so here are some guiding questions for the remainder of our webinar. And we're going to use the chat box, which hopefully you just saw me something post in just now. The first question we would like to discuss in the chat is, what are those common forms of bullying and harassment that you've seen on campus in your professional experience? So let's look into the chat and see what type of responses we get, and we'll highlight a few of them as we go along. Definitely. Thank you, Ms. Forrest. Definitely.
Relational bullying, cyberbullying, right?
Yeah, it's that harassment on social media, of course, that we're going to talk about later.
Name calling, exclusion, spreading pictures.
Hazing is one that we often don't go into detail about, but it definitely qualifies. These are really good.
Roasting.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Anna.
Right, that's that.
Teacher roasting students.
Yeah, we talk about that a little bit. Those common forms of bullying, often student to student, student to staff. Rarely, but it happens, like that situation, staff to student, and then even staff to staff.
Right.
Yes, you guys are right on point with all of this. Okay, Angie, do you want to shift?
Yeah.
We'll shift to the second
So the
question.
second one. So how do we create safe channels of communication so that students are willing to report to staff members? So if you could type that in the chat. How do we create safe channels for communication? Anonymous reporting? Yes. That's
Definitely.
for secondary, right? A lot of the kids don't want to be called snitches. So that's good for secondary.
Yes, Shannon Cornell with Take Each Concern Seriously.
Yes. Relationship building, right? Building relationships. Yeah.
Miss Kim King,
that's
build
a big
rapport
one.
with students so they trust. Perfect.
Building that trust.
Okay, so this is the context of the context that we want to keep in mind as we go into our breakouts later too, as well, knowing that this is what I've seen and this is what I absolutely need to ensure that I'm getting the right information from my students and my school site.
So we're going to start with the definition of bullying, and we think it's important to start with that because you know that everyone may have an idea of what bullying is, but as you know, especially when you have parents come into the office complaining that their student was being bullied, or that students come in and say, I've been bullied, when really, in reality, it could have been a conflict, right? So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page on what bullying is. And this is a definition from stopbullying.gov. And it says, bullying is unwanted aggressive behavior among school-age children that involves a real or perceived power imbalance. The behavior is repeated or has the potential to be repeated over time. And just want to highlight the part where it has perceived power imbalance and is repeated. So what do we know? Most bullying goes unreported. So about 57% of bullying incidents are left unreported. And we know those statistics rise when we get to middle and high school. Bullying is often unwitnessed. So with cyberbullying, and also when you're on campus, maybe hallways or restrooms, a lot of times the bullies thrive in environments where they're not held accountable for their actions. So there's different types of bullying. So there's 4 different types and we're gonna go over each one. So physical, which is hurting a person's body or possessions. Verbal, or writing mean things. Social, and this is one that we see a lot of times as well, and that's hurting someone's reputation. So maybe starting rumors or sending out videos that someone listed earlier or pictures of someone. And then you have cyber, so using technology to hurt someone. That's a big one that a lot of our schools have been dealing with most recently. And then also now that we're on distance learning and technology is so accessible and we're all relying on technology right now, that we wanted to highlight. So what are the cyberbullying differences? Accessibility, it's accessible 24/7. So as you all know, I know growing up in school, I didn't have to deal with social media and things of that nature. So we were able to go home and actually get away from all of that. But it's accessible. It's in your face 24/7. It's also anonymous. So, you know, people tend to get more confident behind the screen. So 50% of students report they didn't even know who was bullying them. And then the disinhibition, saying you can't see me, but I can see you. And then people don't report it. A lot of victims don't report it because they're scared of having their phone or computer privileges taken away. They don't want to lose that power, and they're scared that their parents will take that away if they report it to their parents.
Okay, so everyone, we're about to go into our first breakout, and the questions for this breakout will be added to the chat as they are just now. What we're going to discuss here, I want you to keep in mind everything that you've shared in the chat room so far, because now you'll actually be able to hear each other's voices and really go into detail. The first question is, who would be most vulnerable to online bullying? Keeping in context about what are those common forms of bullying that we discussed before. And the second question is, how can your current bullying prevention plan be adapted for distance learning? So you're going to see a little prompt that comes up on your screen that will allow you to be divided into different breakouts. You'll be unmuted and you'll be able to discuss. We'll give you a prompt also before you come back, and then we'll begin to highlight some of the things we discussed. Okay, so let's see. Had some really great submissions in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna go join one of these breakouts real quick. Be right back.
I'll be right back. I'm gonna step away for just a second.
Okay. If they're entering and they weren't in a breakout, then they are probably just on the side right now. So if you just entered, we're doing a breakout session right now. So we're just gonna wait a few minutes for the breakout to finish and for participants to come back to the main room.
Yeah, the breakout room I just went into, they were still in introductions and discussions, so it's still.
Yeah, but people are still entering the webinar.
Gotcha.
So if you're just entering our webinar, we have participants in breakout sessions. So they're gonna come back in a second. So we're just waiting for them to return.
It would have maybe about 5 more minutes, Angie. Or maybe.
I think only a couple more minutes.
Oh, only a few more. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I know this probably isn't the best time, but here's an interesting little side story from one of the responses in the chat. Someone had said, you know, it's not just the students who bully each other online. I thought that was really interesting. You know,
Yeah.
I've seen some stuff like that before. It's definitely a concern.
There is a 2-minute warning.
Oh, Thank you. How can I get the chat to go back on the side? I think Athena was explaining that to me, or explaining that to us earlier, right? How to put the chat on the right. She's nodding her head like, yes, I did. I did explain that. Okay, let's see.
So when I hit escape, you'll get your screen back and you can open the chat. It'll go to the right.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Cammie. All right, Robin. Okay. I want to make sure I keep it professional, but at the same time, this is where I would start doing shout outs to all the people coming in, right? Just making sure they feel greeted, you know?
It looks like we're returning.
Okay. Let's get to it.
So those of you who are returning back from the breakout session, if you could put in the chat what your group discussed.
Just pick a highlight of something that was really interesting to you, something that made it clear to you how we should be approaching things in light of needing to do everything virtually, or who you think the most vulnerable population is to online bullying. Thank you, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
Those are good. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Kathy. SPED services.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, students who don't have a strong social circle. Homeless youth.
Yeah. Anyone who hasn't had some form of training or introduction into how to respond to being targeted for any of the aspects of your life. If you don't know already how to respond to someone being aggressive or someone constantly harassing you, you are vulnerable. And anyone who has a device, and especially if it's a device you have to rely upon, again, puts you in that category.
We also said students who were already being bullied on campus would be also most online. So if it's already happening face to face, then most likely it can happen online as well.
Yes, Trisha Kling mentioned something just like that. Students who had been receiving counseling, who felt that school is their safe place and no longer have advocating adults.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very key.
So how can your current bullying prevention plan be adapted for distance learning?
Let's see if we can get some responses to the second breakout discussion. Just a quick highlight. What can be done to adapt that current plan we have for the virtual environment? All right, Elena, thank you.
Having an open dialogue, email outreach, online tools. I see restorative practices in there.
Yeah, weekly restorative practices virtually. Trisha wants to work. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for those. We will definitely be revisiting and surveying the students, most definitely. Okay, save those, save that line of thinking because we will revisit it later in the material. But now we're gonna transition. So we're gonna talk about what reinforces bullying, what prompts it to continue, what maintains it behaviorally. So we know that behavior is served by function. What does it get for someone? How do they respond to it? What need does it fulfill? And behavior is typically served by something being reinforcing because of the attention you receive because of it, something being reinforcing because of what it allows you to escape or avoid, and something being reinforcing because what you gain access to. So that's why all of our choices, all of our behaviors are reinforced. And for bullying specifically, the attention that you might receive from your peers or witnesses or bystanders, either through, in the case of cyberbullying, your devices like your cell phone. If it's live and on campus, it could be from laughing or emotional reactions from the crowd around you. And the third key one that I want to highlight is untrained staff responses. It can still be reinforcing in terms of you needing attention from people. If you were a student who didn't necessarily have the best foundational communication skills, right? And you really wanted an adult's attention, and you found that by targeting members of your class or your peer group, adults started to give you more attention, especially if it's in the type of attention that you really respond to, you would probably continue to engage in those behaviors to receive that adult attention. And you can also get that same attention from the person that you're bullying. Some students may try to laugh off what someone said about them or what they've done. They might begin to emotionally react in the form of crying, or they might try to fight back. And some students that engage in bullying behaviors are so deprived of interaction and engagement from anyone else in their life that they begin to bully their peers, hoping that they get some of that reinforcement to come back. Then there's also, your own social emotional feelings you have about engaging in those behaviors, whether it's bragging or feeling more confident because you have a little bit more control over your environment. It would definitely reinforce the likelihood that you'll continue to engage in those behaviors. And of course, the one that stands out the most for some of our students that really struggle financially in terms of resources is access to things. Bullying for money, bullying for access to devices that we might not have in our own lives, or anything. It could even be clothing. I've seen students target each other for access to clothing. And these are those conditions which will always allow for bullying to continue or for it to shape and change to something else. So we have to be able to analyze it as well from a behavior perspective. Thank you, Angie. And harassment, how harassment differs from bullying. As Angie mentioned in the beginning, bullying is only considered bullying when it's repeated and there's this perceived difference in power. With harassment, it's when someone would start to target someone specifically because of their demographics. If a person was a member of a protected class because of a disability, gender-specific bullying or sexual orientation, one's ethnicity, their nationality, religion, or race, we're starting to shift into the harassment area. And that's both something that would probably require more significant discipline or punishment from the school site. There could be legal responses that need to follow up after. You could be liable for lawsuits, particularly in the context of, student to staff or staff to student harassment. Angie.
Yes. Also wanted to highlight, it doesn't say it on the page, but wanted to highlight that on stopbullying.gov, it talks about when it's an adult to a student as well, it could turn into harassment. So wanted to let you all know that as well.
Fantastic. Okay, so I am about to launch a poll question for you guys just to check in after everything we've discussed so far. And the question is, how would you rank bullying as a priority for your sites upon return to live instruction? So just pick an answer and we'll tally up the results. It should prompt you on your screen to select one. I'm going to give a good minute or two for everyone to get their responses in. Connie Newman, I just want to highlight something that Connie Newman shared in the chat. An emphasis on social contracts in distance learning. That would be interesting. I like that idea. As if I want to make sure that you understand that part of me doing this for you, this instruction that's coming is, can you agree to these terms, right? All right, let's get a few more responses in there. We've got about 71% of our attendees right now who've responded. I'll give about 10 more seconds real quick. All right, I'm gonna try to share those results with the poll now. Angie, is that okay with you?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect, all right. Let's see, we're gonna try to share those results. All right, I hope everybody can see that on your screen right now. We have about, wow, we have 46% saying an immediate concern, 45% saying it's a potential issue that needs to be addressed, and then only a few people saying it's not something that really needs to take the highlight right now. But I think actually I want to lump those two, the immediate concern and the potential concern, together, because it shows it's going to happen, and if it hasn't already happened, it's something that I need to draft something for pretty soon. Okay, so yeah, let's focus on this as if it was that immediate concern, right? So that's where we're going to move into why invest in bullying prevention. Okay. The victims of bullying are 4.6 times as likely as their peers to develop agoraphobia. Sometimes that's why we'll see some students with those long periods of absence or abrupt periods of absence, because what they're experiencing on campus has now started to manifest into this other thing where the opportunity to learn or engage curriculum, the opportunity to participate in activities, none of that is nearly as important as the difficulty I'm experiencing because I'm being bullied. 7 times as likely as their peers to develop generalized anxiety, which is understandable. If nothing is consistent in your experience on campus, or if you don't feel like it's a safe place, you're always going to be anxious about your daily interactions on campus. 3.1 times as likely as their peers to develop panic disorder, which if someone was bullying you, I think it's warranted that you would probably panic, unless you've had some prevention training from the staff on campus on how to respond to that and where to go and how to navigate those feelings. And both for the bully and the victims of bullying, these individuals are 4.8 times as likely as their peers to develop clinical depression, which speaks to what I mentioned before in terms of why the behavior could be reinforced, because there's some need or some deficit there that's not being met. So it's not as if the bully is always walking away from the interaction feeling great about themselves or feeling fulfilled, all that social wellness. None of those things are being met for the bully nor the victim. So they're both likely to experience some form of a low or some form of depression. Thank you, Angie.
So we're going to talk about different strategies that can be implemented to support with bully prevention. So first is the objectives for adult. Adults should be able to differentiate between respectful and non-respectful behavior, label and interrupt non-respectful student behavior when encountered. You want to make sure there's staff consistency. So that's where your minors and majors come in, right? Ensuring that everyone on campus understands the difference between respectful and non-respectful behavior. Use student and faculty forums to adapt curriculum to the local context, so that could be your assemblies or your staff meetings. Teach and reinforce student expectations. And I've seen somebody in the chat wrote that as well, about going over expectations, and then now that you're on distance learning, maybe revising them to support with that. Mediate conflict if presented with a problem. So using restorative practices, if you're familiar with that, is a really good way of mediating that conflict between two students. Collect and use information to continually improve the social climate of the school. So with all that, I know that was a long list, but it's really a 3-part approach to school-wide bully prevention. You want to make sure that you're considering the smallest change that can make the biggest impact. So if you're already doing something on campus, you could just beef it up real quick to support with bully prevention. So like we talked about the expectations, right? But you also want to do this without teaching bullying or demeaning children who engage in bullying behavior. So step one is establishing a whole school social culture where positive behavior is expected and rewards for bullying are not provided. You want to provide training for the adults as well as going over expectations with the students. And then you want to provide direct individualized supports for students who engage in bullying or victim behaviors. So you start with using your data. So data-based decision making is important. So here's an example of some surveys that you could actually give out to students to start with your data to help guide your decisions on implementation. So the one to the left that you see on the screen is a bully prevention survey. It's on pbis.org. It is paper-based, so you would have to set systems in place to support with how you're looking over the surveys, but it's a really good resource for you all. And then the school climate survey, this is on pbis.apps that you guys might know. It's electronic and it actually creates graphs for you as well. And so you may know this one on pbisapps.org.
All right, guys.
So after looking at the surveys, let's do a breakout discussion. We have another breakout.
Right. We're going to move into our second breakout. It'll go just the way as the one did before. You'll discuss, and then we'll come back and we'll highlight some of the things we discussed. This one may seem a little bit shorter, but we're only moving forward. The chats or the questions are also posted in the chat. Thank you, Athena. All right, you're going to go in. How have you gathered feedback from your students regarding bullying? How did you use the data to enhance your prevention plan? And what are some ways you can gather feedback from your students? I see. Well, hopefully they already handled the introductions in the first breakout, so this one can be just purely about responding to the questions.
Yes, but there's also new participants, so.
Yeah, I've been watching that you know, the manage the participants panel. And when I start seeing the numbers go down, I started getting worried at first. I was like, where's everyone going? This is where, you know, they were starting to get into it. But now I know they're going into the waiting rooms and then other people are coming in. So.
Yeah. Or they're just waiting for it to.
Mm-hmm. So you think maybe about like 137, Angie?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we should start seeing people returning now from their breakouts.
Yeah, so it'll probably be about 30 more seconds, maybe.
I think we'll start to see them. Yeah, they're definitely coming back in now, I think. Okay, everyone, just keep doing that. In the chat, just list up some of those highlights that that you discussed in your breakout. So,
Okay, so have you gathered feedback from students regarding bullying, or what are some ways? You could type it into the chat. We see students focus groups.
That kind of collects that initial baseline as well.
okay, everyone's back now. Okay, so in the chat, just type up a few of the highlights. We'll go over them briefly as we get ready for the next transition. Okay, we've got Ann Montano. Gather feedback from students through pre and post student surveys during guidance lessons. Based on the student answers is how we determine where students require more learning, which helps enhance our lessons. Yes, definitely seeing what are they responding to, what do they have concerns about, and then how should we input that feedback into our lesson plans for addressing behaviors. That's always beautiful. Their school climate survey from Ashley Schaefer. Feedback for PBIS lessons, indeed. Michael Fontana, student focus groups. It's always good direct feedback. Fits into your overall PBIS. It's not specifically outlined into a type of plan. Okay.
District-wide surveys as related to school climate.
I wonder if anyone has done any like data sampling for like locations, or where is the area on campus where things, where do students who engage in bullying behavior feel most comfortable doing that? Because that would tell me where I need to address materials. That would tell me where I need to focus in any type of an assembly, or maybe like a presentation.
Playground or restroom.
For elementary and restrooms, yes, high school.
Passing period. After school.
Typically all those times when they feel as if they're unsupervised.
The bus.
Unstructured time.
Locker room.
Indeed. I think the key takeaway from that usually too is when anytime anyone feels as if they're not being observed or they're not being supervised, is how can we best invest or instill that responsibility within themselves, that they should be the person to be, overseeing the care for everyone in their environment, right? So it's not so much that the teacher or the adult isn't present, so all rules are off. More so is, this is what we expect of ourselves, and me being a part of the community or the school site, here's how I'm going to contribute to maintaining that expectation. So if I saw one of my peers being bullied, I would want to, what is my level of comfortability feeling intervening if I have received that type of, instruction from my teacher, but also how can I best support? Hey, this is not the type of school where we do that type of thing. Even though we know that takes a lot of instruction for our students to feel that empowered.
Yes, and just want to reiterate, I know that we talked about surveys, but that's not going to be our only form of data, right? We have referrals, right, that we could look at to track data and see what supports we should put in place. So it's really big. We have Swiss. If you guys are using Swiss, that helps, right? And looking to be able to do a drill down. Just want to reiterate, it's just not the surveys. It could be referrals or other forms of data as well.
These are all wonderful, wonderful responses. So we're going to move. We're going to move a little bit further, talking about our objectives for students, and a little bit more on our objectives or ways that staff can respond.
So we first talked about the objectives for the adults. So now the students. So when we see or deal with different behaviors, we want to make sure that we're not feeding to the flame. So when a student sees another student being bullied, what do they usually do? They're usually pulling out their phone and recording, or laughing, or calling their friends over to come see, right? And every time they do that, they're feeding to the flame, and they're making it bigger, right? And they're reinforcing that bullying behavior that Craig discussed earlier. So we want to make sure that we're talking to students about how to put that flame out. And here's an activity that you can do that's in the picture. And we do it a lot of times with staff and with students, is we actually light a candle and we talk about all those behaviors that are feeding the flame. And then we get a cup and cover the candle and show them that every time that you're being an upstander instead of a bystander, you're putting the flame out. You're not feeding that behavior. You're not reinforcing that behavior. So here's a video that we're going to share with you with how you can discuss with your students being an upstander instead of a bystander.
Bullying.
More online than anything else.
But if someone stands up for you, it's like you're not alone. Don't stand by.
Don't
stand by.
Stand up.
Bullying is a problem.
I've seen people call people ugly, stupid, dumb, worthless.
On timelines and feeds. Made up rumors about me. The video of it was put on Facebook and a lot of people were liking it and commenting on it. It was a lot of kill yourself. A lot, like 24 people telling me to kill myself. It's so easy to say something and not even realize the impacts that it's having on people.
If you witness something on social media and like that post, then it's kind of enforcing what the bully is saying.
It's really easy for anyone to be a bystander.
They listen in and laugh. They are just there and they don't stop it.
It's fear of having someone bully you in return.
I felt really guilty for not helping that person.
Being someone that isn't a bystander.
It could be dangerous.
Tell the teachers or adults that this person's being bullied and this person's the bully.
Someone else will be like, don't be a snitch.
You know what? This is not okay.
Stop just being bystanders. Step up and say, hey, everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect.
You're gonna feel a lot better if you stand up for someone
Because that means so much.
it's honestly like the best thing you'll ever do for yourself or someone else. If nobody says anything, it's just gonna keep happening.
Don't stand by, stand up.
So that was just a quick video on how schools can implement or teach students to be upstanders instead of a bystander. And how do we do that? Not by telling them to fight back, right? But standing up and saying, hey, that's not okay, that behavior that you're displaying. Or giving them an opportunity or building relationships so they can come to adults and tell them, hey, we're dealing with this behavior, and being sure that they're talking to a trusted adult. So how do we teach students? Here's different ways that different schools have implemented their campaign, as you say, for bully prevention. So to the left are brochures. This is from a school in Chicago that actually handed out brochures to all their stakeholders. They also created a team. So it was a middle school. They created a bully prevention expect respect team that actually went out and taught the other students, and that supported with buy-in because they heard from different students. Then another school that we worked with, Helendale Elementary, they put on a whole buddy implementation system on their campus. So where you'll see to the right, there's posters that they posted all over campus, and they supported it with curriculum as well that we'll talk about a little later, called Expect Respect. And it was a whole Be a Buddy campaign. So be a friend when you hear someone name calling. Stop, think about what to do, be a buddy, talk, tell that person that it was hurtful, and then walk away. So go tell a trusted adult. They created a buddy bench that you'll see in the middle. And this is actually by the playground area. And if a student feels down or they feel like they need somebody to talk to, or they just need a friend, they go sit on that bench. And then other students walk up and say, hey, do you need a friend right now? Do you need somebody to talk to? And that was what taught behavior. That didn't just come natural, right? They had to create something and create an atmosphere atmosphere and create a culture on campus to where it's easy. And it works, we tell you, because we've actually went and sat on the bench and had students come up and say, hey, do you need a buddy right now? So it comes though, but it also comes with support and with teaching those students how to support each other.
Angie, just real quick, a little point on that bench as well. Everyone in the chat was really responding to location-based data, telling them where these things were happening and what could possibly be done there. And this is a great example of the bench was already there. All we had to do was adapt it to serve as like a contrived opportunity for the expectations we were already teaching. So you have to get a little bit more creative. Maybe if you notice something's happening in the cafeteria, is there a way that we can create a space too where our students will have the opportunity to engage in those social skills that we want to see? So that's a great example.
Thank you, Craig. I can't see the I'm sharing, so thank you.
And then,
also, they also created t-shirts for the staff to wear, and it gave expectations on being a buddy and that the staff wore and the students were able to refer to it. So it's just another cool way of their buddy campaign that they implemented.
Okay, so when a student reports bullying behavior, which I think Suzanne was just speaking to in the chat, it's always a combination of things. I'm telling you an active skill that you can engage in, and then I'm telling you what you need to do to follow up with that skill. So first, we need to make sure that they understand to feel comfortable, giving us a full detailed report of what happened. We want to build that relationship. So then we can reinforce them after they tell us by telling them something like, I'm glad you told me, I'm glad you express yourself, or you've been really responsible by taking ownership of how you feel in terms of what's been happening to you. So just for reporting the problem already, we want to reinforce them. Then we want to follow up with those good fact-finding questions, right? Did you tell the student to stop? If they did, we're going to praise them. If not, we want to contrive another opportunity for what can happen next time. We want to know, how did they respond? If they responded by walking away or trying to remove themselves from the interaction, we'll praise them. If not, we know it's a skill that we need to practice. Then we want to get those details so we can follow up, pragmatically as an adult, who was engaging this behavior, what exactly happened, and how did it look, when did it happen, and where has it been happening? And then we, of course, primarily want to ensure their safety. What's the severity of the situation, and what does a student need to feel safe so that they can continue to get access to their education, so they can also go home and not take things from school back to their home life, and generally just so they can proceed through their day. By hitting those 4 steps, we know that we have a pretty consistent, predictable way of responding. Thank you, Angie. And this is a good example of any type of a type of prompt. So for the students, it's one piece. It's a card. You can include it. I've heard of staff including it in a lanyard. You could probably save it as a wallpaper for your phone. You could attach it to the back of a clipboard. Maybe if you were on recess duty in the elementary site, if you had any other type of like dismissal or supervisory, role or duty. For the secondary sites, you could attach it to anything that you were carrying with you at the time. But for the students, the visual prompt is on the left, right? So we're stop, walk, and talk. That is also recognizable for that younger early childhood, right? If they're taught what those symbols mean. And then on the right, we have those simple steps for staff to follow. With the reporting student, thank you for telling me. Ask who, what, why, when, where everything happened. Inquire about their safety, and give them some reinforcement for handling it responsibly. And then also on the bottom half of that card is how to begin engaging with the student who was engaging in the bullying, right? Get their side of what happened. Ask them how the student was responding. Do they know how to recognize those cues that something is just not correct about the way that they're engaging with their peer? And then if you can clearly tell that they're not responding appropriately, how can we give them the opportunity to do the correct thing, the replacement behavior? Thank you. All right, let's talk about this preventative steps for cyberbullying, right? So if we're on campus, we're always giving our kids access to the material, always reiterating and re-explaining how we want to conduct ourselves on campus, how other people respond to our conduct and behavior. And how important is it to allow yourself to have boundaries and self-respect and concern for your own well-being? Now we're in the virtual world where like the physical responses to bullying may not be so clear, right? So we have to set our expectations regarding the type of platforms that we're using. If it's something that's school-based, if it's like this, like a distance learning or some type of virtual conferencing, we could have something up that will, again, review the expectations for that interaction. That can also extend into their own home life, their own devices. How do you want to conduct yourself on your social media pages? We want to always try to promote positive interactions with our students. So if we had a situation like this, like a giant 100-person webinar, we might all say, in the chat room, everybody say one great thing that you enjoyed from the person that you were in the breakout with, trying to promote those positive interactions. We want to keep a close eye and monitor our online platforms for anything that seems like a discrepancy or seems like it could have maybe some ill intentions behind it. Sometimes messages get left, sometimes platforms get abused. And then we want to provide them with a platform as well to report cyberbullying. So whether that was like a Google survey, whether it was like an anonymous email they could contact, whether there's a designated person that they know, even though we're not on campus, this adult is still the person to contact about this thing that I'm experiencing or that I've observed someone else going through. Thank you, Andy. And then incorporating technology into our behavior matrix. So here's our teaching matrix for what would typically be on campus, but we also have a component here for technology. That might be for the computer lab, it might be for the library, it could be for the devices that we're given in class. We want to make sure that we clearly outline that technology use, devices, and the virtual internet, the online world is another environment where we have to conduct ourselves with the same quality that we would do in person on campus. So they've pinned respectful with your words matter, pause and reflect before you post. They've pinned achieving and being organized with checking your feelings and rereading your messages for the intent or for are you really expressing yourself in the best way possible? And then under responsible, they have modeling for others, double checking your sources and considering the feelings of others. Just right there, real simplistic, something that would work for both secondary and maybe getting into that like Angie was for the like later age groups in primary.
The primaries and then the secondary, yeah. And this is really good as well because we know sometimes that gets lost, but a lot of our students are on Chromebooks, right, daily. So it should be implemented at the beginning of the school year. But now with this change, with distance learning, it's important that before you even start, you start with adding technology into your matrix and your expectations.
All right. Oh, great. Angie, you and I can both talk about this one. Okay, so this is an app that you can get on your phone. I don't know, is it also available on like a computer or PC?
I think it's mostly on the phone,
okay.
But this is No Bullying. It's put on by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And it's a really good app because it provides conversation starters for teachers and parents when they are approached with a student who said they were dealing with bullying. It also provides hotline phone numbers for you to refer to and refer your students to as well. It provides many different things on it. It's really good. I would advise that you go and you can download it to your phone. I downloaded it to mine, but No Bullying app is a really good resource.
One of the features that it lists right there at the beginning is it starts easy and meaningful conversations with your children. So if we as professional staff have to be trained on how to respond, what type of question, like what is the framing of the question that we should ask the student? I'm sure parents at home are wondering the same thing because we're all going to just rely on, our common experiences and what we know best. Some parents have that hard line. If someone touches you, this is how you respond. I don't want to hear about what you felt in regards to your, what happened at school. I want to know what you did. This can also give them some framing questions that keep it a little bit more objective and less reactive.
Yes.
Okay. And now let's talk about how to include our stakeholders in our prevention plans and our ongoing effort to address bullying, since about 45% of us said it's an immediate concern and it's going to be a concern when we get back. So we want to make sure that we always communicate the goals of our PBIS and our bullying bully prevention actions, right? If we're noticing any type of trends, how are we addressing them? We want to encourage positive behaviors and interactions. Just as much as we respond to things that seem like negative behaviors, we want to make sure that we're equally responding to positive behaviors, always promoting and praising and reinforcing the things that we see on campus that we want to continue. We want to contrive opportunities for the students to engage like that. One of the previous sites where I was working, we would sometimes hold like after school dismissal dance parties, right? Just so everyone could have one last positive experience before they left the school campus. We want to discourage our problem behaviors by always calling them out when we see them. We want to be consistent in how we address them. But like Angie said from before, we don't want to demean those students who are engaging in behaviors. Build those positive relationships, include all of these materials in our parent and student handbooks, our enrollment packets, so they have it from the beginning. PTA presentations, maybe you have a monthly newsletter that speaks on just on the general feeling of the site, or if there's been a decrease in certain types of behaviors. We want to assign sometimes homework that teach for our students to teach their parents the school-wide expectations. We want to embed our PBI's framework in all of our school activities, from our back-to-school nights to any type of seasonal festival or any type of awards assembly or any kind of gathering. Okay.
Lastly, we're just going to end with some resources for you all. So here's one that the Sheriff's Office put out. And you guys have probably seen this, but this is 15 apps that parents should know about. And it highlights apps and it kind of breaks down what each one is. Of course, Facebook and Instagram isn't on there because it's one that we all kind of already know about, but it highlights Snapchat, TikTok, which has been the big thing right now with this time at home. So
Definitely.
I encourage parents to just make sure you're looking over your kid's phone. The calculator app is one big one that looks like a calculator, but it's actually a social app that students could talk to one another on. And it's been reported that bullying does happen on that one, as well as Kik. I had Kik for a little bit and I took it off because it kind of connects you with people around in your area and automatically connects you to where you could just start messaging right away. So I would look on that one too.
One thing I would say also about that previous slide is you notice that most of these apps don't have any age restrictions on them. So you might not think that your student would be, or your student or your child would have access to some of these, but they probably do, which is why it's important to think, okay, just what is my child or my student exposed to, and how much can I, oversee that, or how much can I engage with them about what they're using, so I have a good idea of what the risks are.
And then next is helpful apps for adults. So these are different apps, and it is a part of the resources. So in the link, you'll be able to get this, and on the other side, it shows the apps to be aware of. But this one helps with parents, and you could actually put some of these apps on your phone, and it could track your student's device and also send you alerts. Some of them can send you alerts if there's any bullying behavior or verbiage that's sent to their phone. So it's a really cool resource. It will be attached to the resources. We did, the link kind of wasn't working right now, so just keep looking back, and you'll be able to get these resources along with the parent. And then this is misdirections in bully prevention. This is another resource that we'll be providing for you guys. And this is outline different ways that schools do implement bully prevention, but misguided ways. So like, for example, zero tolerance policies, right? We implement them, but how are you supporting those students? Sending them home right away. It doesn't really support with dealing with those behaviors. I did see this in the chat. This is on pbis.org, and this is the Expect Respect curriculum that some of you guys were talking about in the chat. There's the elementary version and a secondary version. So to the left is the elementary and to the right is the secondary. It provides lessons for you that you can literally take and implement right away. And then it also provides like a parent letter for you to send out to parents in the secondary one, and a checklist for trainers. So, and it's free 99, we love. So definitely here's a resource for you all on pbis.org.
All right, we have some additional resources here. We have 5 tips to support teachers with modern day bullying, which is actually written by Angie, so I already know that's an expert article. Then we have the Expect Respect curriculum that we discussed just a moment ago. Creating a PBIS behavior teaching matrix for remote instruction. I reviewed that one myself. Very good. Very much what we discussed earlier about designating a technology component of your behavior matrix and then expanding it for all remote instruction. And then just a brief overview of the coronavirus, online learning, social isolation, and cyberbullying. How do we support our students? And then, of course, speaking of social media, here we are. You can follow us at CalHelpJPA at Twitter and Instagram, or on Facebook and YouTube. And if you wanted to get an e-news article from us, you can get one of those at our dmcelpa.org e-news, and we'll send you that regularly. And in closing, our recognition process is currently on hiatus, but we've replaced it with the California PBIS Community Cares acknowledgement. Angie, is the deadline for that soon?
It's June, I think.
June. Oh, so we have
yeah,
a great
so
amount of time.
It's just a different process. I know you're all used to doing the TFI and then having walkthroughs, but it's different since we're all schools closed. It's just a way to recognize schools and what they're doing within their community. So they could submit a video or a written explanation of what their school is doing to support the community to get recognized. So just a different way, and we're excited about it.
And there are more webinars upcoming on the CPC website. I believe.
Check out tomorrow's. Tomorrow's is Natalie Sedano and Athena Vernon, Universal Screeners. They're our colleagues. So check them out from 1 to 2.
Which is interesting because that also kind of links with ours. If I were to notice that a student maybe had some social emotional concerns that maybe would kind of link up with them either being vulnerable to bullying or possibly engaging in bullying. So I would definitely check that one out to consider, like, okay, how does this work from the moment that I actually first put the universal screener in place? And we may be offering this training again in May, right, Angie? Possibly. Pending. All right. And also the conference is coming up still in September. So save that date, keep it in mind so we can all collaborate and network and discuss our successes with PBIS in the future. And of course, here's our contact information for Angie and myself, both of us with CalHelp. Feel free to email us, drop us a line. And of course, the most crucial part, the next one, is filling out our eval, so giving us some feedback so how we can better enrich this presentation or any of our webinar features, discussing in the chat, the breakouts, the providing greater resources. Just give us some feedback so we can make ourselves a little bit stronger.
Yes, your feedback is important to us. And thank you all. I see in the chat the responses, so thank you all for hanging in there with us for this hour.
Perfect. So that link will stay up, and you can also find that link later when the CPC website